Okay.
Oops, wait a minute. All right, I'm going back a slide. There we go. All right. You want to start us off, Jacqueline?
All right, yep. My name is Jacqueline Hansen. I am a licensing worker with Guiding Harbor. I've been with the agency for just about 2 years now, and I previously was a foster care worker. I have my master's degree in social work. I graduated from Wayne State University last year. And that's about it.
Wonderful. All right, go ahead, Tawana.
Hi, my name is Tawana Fredenberg, and I've been with Guiding Harbor for about 7 months now in the licensing department, and I enjoy it.
All right, and I'm Kristen McGraw. I'm the licensing supervisor of our group, and we used to do these meetings in person, but now we're doing them all on Zoom or on Teams, so this is a little bit different for us as well. But we do have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to do so that we get all of our information in that you need to see, and then we will get you a binder that goes with it with the additional documentation in there. So, all right, I'm going to be quiet and let Jacqueline go.
Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide, or are we starting here?
There we go.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just start with a little bit of history about Guiding Harbor. It started out as just solely a residential program. We still have the residential program today, which started in 1958 in Belleville, but now we also have expanded to foster care, supervised independent living, and we also do adoption. Our agency is a nonprofit agency, and we are a private agency, which means we're not DHS. We're a separate agency through there. So foster care, the goal of foster care is to provide temporary care for children who may have been abused or neglected. So our mission is to create a supportive environment for children, young adults, and families. So our primary goal is to reunite families whenever possible. So our main goal with children placed in foster care is going to be reunification unless it is determined that that is not in the child's best interest. So the permanency goals are most commonly reunification, and then it may switch to adoption, or for older children, we may look into independent living or a guardianship if that is more appropriate for a child. So children in foster care have dealt with trauma in different ways, and so they tend to have a little bit they have similar needs to other children, but along with the trauma that they've experienced, they really require a stable family environment, love, nurturance, empathy, protection, understanding, and acceptance. They really need a stable family unit to help them through the trauma they're dealing with, not being able to live with their biological families full time.
I'm going to jump in for a second, if that's okay. We do this presentation both for relative care providers and for non-relatives. And if you're a grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, a sibling providing care to a child, you don't get a lot of time to prepare for these kids to arrive in your home. And I think, that's one of the harder things about that. So as we do orientation, we're hoping to learn a little bit more about the child that's in your home, because these things happen to all the children that land in foster care. It's a very common thread that we see going on through there. And so just watch for that kind of thing. As a family member, you're going to say, of course, I'm going to provide a stable family environment and love and nurturance. But as a family care provider, you're also going to run into a child who might have experienced trauma, who is going to show behaviors that are this much higher than than what a normal child might display. So we'll talk about some of that as we go through here. Most of our non-relative families are required to go through training, and it takes they get 15 hours of training, so they're about as prepared as we can get them to be. Whereas our relative providers often get a call and have 24 hours or even, a half an hour to make that decision of whether you're going to care for that child or not.
So then this slide kind of goes into discussing trauma, which I mentioned a little bit on the previous slide. So even if a child is placed with a family member that they know really well, that they've seen many times before being placed with them, they're still experiencing trauma by not being in their household with their parents, and dealing with having to move from them unexpectedly. This can cause issues like the inability to trust the adult that they're placed with. They may be insecure, especially if they've had to move from different households in the past. They might be afraid to trust the household or the adult that they're with, or they might be worried that their placement is going to move, which can also cause difficulty with forming healthy attachments, and also low self-esteem and self-worth if, they're worried that, anything that they might do could cause them to have to be moved, and they don't they don't want that to happen. So it can be really difficult for children being placed out of their home.
Do you want somebody else to jump in here, Jacqueline? Just let us know. You're doing great.
Okay, it's up to you guys. If there's anything you want to add, just feel free. So foster parents have a major role, a very important role. And the most important thing that they are doing is providing a safe home for the children. Something with relatives that's important to remember is that birth parents cannot live in the home. So even if you still have a good relationship with the child's biological parents, they're not able to spend the night in the home. Even if you think it's 100% safe, there's a reason that the child is not currently approved for overnight visits with the parents, and the birth parents cannot stay overnight unless the court approves it for some reason. So visitation at the beginning will be supervised by a worker or a designee that the worker chooses, which may be the care provider at the time. Now, eventually visitation sometimes will get moved to unsupervised overnight and things like that, but generally it starts out with supervised visits, and the court orders must be followed. And then monthly foster care visits will occur, so a worker will be coming to your house once a month, and that's not something that can really be negotiated. They have to see the child just to confirm that everything is going well. And then the children need to be in school. They have to be in school at all times. You can't choose to take them out of school. That is looking a little bit different right now with the pandemic, but the children still are required to participate in school. They're able to participate in after-school activities, sports, things like that. You're encouraged to attend parent-teacher conferences. The foster care worker may also want to attend those. And then IEP meetings are also important if the child needs an IEP through the school. And then you're also required to provide transportation, making sure that they're getting to their medical and dental appointments they need, making sure they go to therapy if that's something that's ordered or will benefit the child, different day-to-day activities that they participate in, and then also visitation. You're responsible for making sure that the child is making it to the places that they need to go.
I just want to chime in. Visitation, so there'll be monthly visits by the foster care caseworker, but also the licensing department as well. We have visits, so we're different I know a lot of times clients, our foster parents will get us mixed up. We have a foster care worker is there for the child. The licensing worker will come in to assess the home to make sure the home is in compliance to have a child placed in your home. So we work together, but we have different jobs that we do. And then also, I wanted to add, Jacqueline, because I know you came out of foster care as well, but is this also a way, the school visits, the parent-teacher conference, is this also a way to help maintain significant relationships with parents by inviting them to come as well to the parent-teacher conference, or no? Is there a stipulation on that?
Unless there's like a reason that the school won't allow the parent there, they are able to go to those meetings and be involved with parent-teacher conferences, because that's a way to keep them involved with their children's life and show that they are working towards reunification with that child.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
This as well. So although the child is removed from the home, the child still loves their parent. You know, that's how they see their parent as still loving, you know, and beautiful. And so although we may know issues of why the child is removed, is very important for us as adults to maintain that significant relationship with the birth parents and siblings.
It is, and we find with our kinship providers that, you know, you've got a past history with the birth parents, probably. There's probably a lot of history going on back there that the foster care worker might be new to. It is okay to put up some boundaries for that parent. You know, for instance, if it's grandma fostering her grandchild, allowing mom or dad to come into that home as they want is no longer really an option now that the child's placed in foster care. Your job becomes protection of that child at that point. And all visitation, all contact with the child needs to be supervised either by the worker or by yourself if you're the designee for that visit. You really want to be conscious of that this is no longer a family relationship where you're going back and forth with your son or your daughter or your cousin along the way. This has now become a professional relationship where your job is primarily taking care of the child, and you can let foster care manage mom and dad's needs at that point.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that too. Whatever you do, if you have a question about it, just make sure you ask the foster care worker before you do it, because being relatives of certain things, just like when they discussed at the beginning about allowing relatives to spend the night, allowing the biological parents to spend the night if they don't have supervised visits. So here's a good example: supervised visits. The relative comes over, you leave the living room. It is no longer supervised no more. If you're supervising it, once you leave the living room, if something happens, then it can be a special investigation for you. And that can open up a door for a special investigation. So you just want to be careful on everything that you do. I'm sorry, it wasn't clear, Kristen.
I was going to see if there was any questions from our audience.
No, I don't have any questions. You just hit on some good factors, though.
Okay, great. And if you do have a question, feel free to chime in. We want to make sure we're, answering your questions as well.
Yes,
ma'am. Let's see. Did we cover most of this? Do you want to go through this one, Jacqueline, or move on?
Yeah, sure. This will, as Tawana kind of touched on, this will create new family roles. And so you might be used to a specific relationship with a family member, but if you have their child in your care, that might change what your role is as a family member. And depending on the age of the child, there also can be physical challenges involved. If you have to lift the child, or help them with specific tasks, things like that. Or when they're older, you may have to drive back and forth for school activities. You are kind of opening up your home and your history to the staff of the agency. when we do our licensing reports, there is a lot of information that we are required to get from you. And whether you're a relative or an unrelated care provider, it's the same process. So just because you're related to the child and you already have the child placed doesn't mean that we're not going to ask you some of those questions. And the questions can be difficult and the process can get kind of intense, but you just have to remember that it's with we're taking the best interest of the child into the situation. And so we're trying to get all the information we can, because if you were an unrelated care provider, we'd be doing the same thing. And children in foster care also can take up more time, more of your free time than biological children would, just due to having to take them to visitation sometimes, or they may have emotional needs or behavior needs that have to be addressed, different appointments. It can be a lot more than just raising your child that was born into your home.
Can I just elaborate? I want to make sure we elaborate a little bit more that we are going to be in your business. So we're going to be in your banking accounts. We're going to be in your relationship, your past relationship history. We're going to be in if you have a criminal background history or anything in your past, we are going to be in it. We have to know about it just so that you know now in orientation. So when there's no question about it. So when she was saying we're going to be in your business, anything you can think about, we are going to be in your business, in your backyard, front yard, living room, kitchen. And we need to know, make sure you have running water, the temperature of your water, how many rooms do they have their own bed, where do they sleep at, everything, who's in your home, who resides in your home, who leaves your home, in and out of your home, we need to know. So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more, because sometimes when we start our process, we still get questioned, well, why do you need to know this? So just so that you can be a little bit prepared, we're going to be in it because we need to, is required by the state. It's part of the process. We have to ask these questions and know.
Thank you. And we're gonna touch on that as we get near the end of this. We do talk a lot about what the licensing process looks like and what we'll ask you to go through. As a relative provider, you do have a choice of whether you become licensed or not. The state prefers that you do. And you do gain a licensing worker who's in your corner and able to help you coordinate services, and just another voice that you can work with that is in your corner. We'll go to the next one. There we go. We've touched on some of this, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the relationship with a birth family is very important. We're not expecting you to be their best friend and, call them on the weekend, see how they're doing and everything. But it is important for you to at least have that professional relationship. And the foster care worker and the licensing worker can also really help with facilitating that relationship. You don't have to give them your phone number. They're not going to know where you live, nothing like that. But visitation is still important, and you have to make sure that the child gets to visitation. And so that might require you to see their parent. They may want to come to doctor's appointments that you're at, school meetings. If they have phone contact with the child, and also if the child plays a sport or something, then they might also want to go to that event as well. The foster care worker really is able to facilitate that a lot, so you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to be giving them all your personal information if you're not comfortable with that, and you don't have to become best friends. But it really is helpful, especially once the child is getting closer to reunification, talking about the child's sleep schedule, or if they have developed new interests, or there's anything that might be helpful for a birth parent and a foster parent to discuss. It can really help the transition if the birth family and the foster family are able to have at least somewhat of a professional relationship. It really helps the child. Okay. So generally speaking, children in foster care will have visits with their parents. Sometimes if parental rights are terminated, then they will not have visits anymore with their parents. And then obviously if they don't have siblings, they won't visit, or if the siblings live in the same home, they don't have to do visits. But parental visits, generally speaking, from children ages 0 to 5, they are supposed to have 2 1-hour visits a week, unless ordered differently by the court. And then ages 5 to 18 will have 1 visit a week, usually for 2 hours. And again, that's dependent on what the court orders. They typically start out supervised. Sometimes they end up being unsupervised. And then they will move to overnights, and then they usually move them to weekends as they're moving closer to reunification. And then if siblings aren't placed together, they're required to have a sibling visit at least once a month. And that doesn't count. Actually, I think now it does count as a visit that with the parent as well. It used to have to be, they had to have a separate visit, separate from their parent visits. The policy changed, I believe, last year, but it's still encouraged that the children be able to visit with their siblings by themselves, obviously with adult supervision.
So you're going to find that these visits, either parent visits or sibling visits or whatever visits are set up, these are tracked and the state is monitoring them. We're monitoring them. They have to happen. If you go on vacation and you choose to take the child with you, the visit will have to be made up, or you can leave the child here with a substitute caregiver and they can do the visit. So those things are really important. And you'll find that as we go through this, there are several places that the state is tracking those visits. It'll be this visits, they track the dentist, the doctor visits, those are important as well. So just keep that in mind, that is ahead.
So the court is has a very big role in the whole foster care process. I mean, it pretty much revolves around the court. The child will initially be court ordered as a temporary court ward. And so it starts out with a court order. Basically, the child is assigned a guardian ad litem, and that is like their attorney. And the foster care worker will speak with the child's attorney. The child's attorney should be reaching out to you at least every quarter before court, and they should be seeing the child as well. I don't know if that's different right now with COVID, but they still should be contacting you at the very least. There's a dispositional review every 90 days, which will determine the progress of the parents and how they're doing at that time. And so that'll kind of determine whether or not the permanency plan is in the best interest of the child, if it should be changed to adoption or one of the different permanency goals. Foster parents are not required to go to court. They're able to because it's a public hearing, and people have mixed feelings about whether or not it's better for the foster parent to go to court or not. But there is information shared at court that sometimes the worker is not able to share with the foster parent. Children also are not required to attend the hearings. Sometimes, though, if it's an older child, they will ask for the child to go to court so that they can check up with the child and talk to them about how they're doing if they want to have their input.
It's so important as those kids, particularly for the older ones who have the opportunity to talk to their GAL lawyer. I think that's, really important. If they're younger, then they're talking more to you as a foster parent to get the case. But it's nice when the child gets that opportunity as well. And Jacqueline, you did touch on the one point that I always want our foster parents to understand is that we have to maintain that confidentiality of the birth parents, even though you are related to them in some way. You know, we can't tell you whether or not they've had positive or negative drug tests. We can't tell you whether they're participating in their parenting time, all the things that make up their treatment plan. But what licensing can do and what going to court does is it allows you, so let's do court first. When you go to court, it allows you to hear all those details of the case that you may need to know. So it is recommended that you go. Now, if you don't go, that's okay. Or if you go to court and you hear something that you don't understand, do call your licensing worker, because we can talk to you about what happened there in a very general way. You know, we're not going to say mom or dad failed 3 drug tests and had 2 positives. But what we can say is remember that all birth parents are tested regularly for substance abuse. And we can't tell you whether those are positive or negative, but they do report those things at court. And then by us speaking generally about what's going on, it helps you to understand all the things that are going on. When you're in the foster care system, there's almost a different language sometimes, and there are things that may or may not make sense. So we just encourage you to ask questions so that we can help you work it through along the way. Anything else from anyone?
No, not at this time.
So this just has a list of services and resources that might be helpful to you. There's a whole group of staff at Guiding Harbor that are able to help you and provide you with support. You have your foster care worker, you have a licensing worker, and then there's supervisors that you can speak to if you need more guidance. But we're generally always there to help you if you have anything you need. We offer a support group every other month that has been going very well, and that kind of offers you some time to speak with other people who might be going through the same thing as you. We also do a training during those support groups, so that can help you get your training hours, but also maybe give you some information that you hadn't heard before, or teach you more about something that you did know before, and just kind of see that you're not alone in this. And then we also can offer you trainings, or if we see trainings that we think you might be interested in, we may send you them. And then the foster care closet is able to have clothing needs for the child, or sometimes even like toys, games, things like that, but it's mostly for clothing. And then we can give you those resources as well to contact them to make an appointment. You also would qualify, well, the child would qualify for WIC, for assistance for that. And then this is the on-call phone number, which is helpful if you have a question after hours, after 5 p.m. and before 9 a.m. And then also on the weekends, there's always somebody who is on call that can answer questions you have. This is for emergencies only, so it's not, you have to use your best judgment, but when you call, it's not just to say like, oh, the birth parent did this, or I'm mad about this, whatever else. It's if there's an emergency, if the child had to go to the hospital, if mostly for foster care, the examples I can think of are if they have to go to the hospital or something's wrong with them, if there's a mental health concern that's urgent, things like that, you would call the on-call phone, because your worker may not answer on the weekend.
Yeah, that's great. We're all working, you know, all of us are working from home right now, but the on-call phone is still going around. Makes our hours a little bit different, but you never know. All right. I think we're getting into the nuts and bolts here of what is required for becoming a parent. And looking at this, do you want a break, Jacqueline?
Oh, up to you. If you want to go over this, that's fine, or I can.
Oh, great. So we are going to get you a binder that has all the documentation in it that is required to become licensed. So you don't have to print it all off for one thing. It has the rule books in it. It has documentation. It has resources. There's a flyer on the foster care closet. There's, just various things in there that'll be helpful. And we are doing that, in a safe way. So what we're doing right now is just delivering it to you. If you don't live too far out, we'll let you know. We're going to bring it and drop it off on your porch, and we'll let you know when it's there so you can grab it. So that's what we're going to go through, is a little bit of what's in that binder and a little bit of what's required. So this slide is talking about the training that is required. It is the same for relatives and non-relatives. 19 hours is what it adds all up to by the time we're done, although it's not all what you think it is. So right now you're in an orientation, which counts for 3 hours. And we're not going to talk for 3 hours. Usually we talk for about an hour. And if there's questions afterwards, we can do that. If you're watching a recording of this, please feel comfortable, emailing your licensing worker with any questions that you have. And that counts. And then there's a paper in the binder that we ask you to sign saying that you've attended this. And there will probably be a paper with a couple of questions on it, just so that we can ensure that you actually watched our video today. The primary training for foster parents is called PRIDE training, and that stands for Parent Resources in something education. It has nothing to do with the LGBT community. And Jacqueline's laughing because I always get that acronym wrong, but it's a parent resource kind of training. It is 12 hours, but it's online right now due to COVID, of course. And you can choose what's convenient. When is a convenient time for you? We help you get signed up for that. It's the same training across the state. And usually it's done in either on a Saturday from 8 to 4 or 2 Saturdays from 8 to 4, or 2 days a week in 3-hour chunks, and there'd be like 4 of those. We want you to get certified in CPR. We have an online class that's quite easy to watch. You get 2 hours for that, but it only takes about maybe half hour to an hour to complete that. And then a basic first aid course. If there's 2 of you applying for a license, then only one of you has to get those 2 things, the CPR and the basic first aid. Once you are licensed, we ask that you get 6 hours annually after that, which isn't hard to do if you attend a support group, which we offer, and other online trainings from other agencies count as well. It just goes by the hour, and we help you get those hours. It is valuable training too. It will assist you with understanding different discipline policies, talking about grief and loss, which the child has probably experienced and you've experienced as well. There's a section on working with foster care workers and other people in the system itself. So it's very valuable. We try and encourage all of our relatives to get signed up for PRIDE as quickly as you can, to get that information and that training, because relatives are really starting behind the 8 ball. The child comes first, and then we're playing catch up to get you to the point where you're comfortable. This is just some nuts and bolts. In that binder is the grievance policy, and there's no denying that this is some very intense work that we're doing. We care about the children in our care. We fall in love with them, and it's just a high emotional job for us and for you as well. So if something's going wrong, if it's not following what you need it to do, if you disagree extensively with what's happening in the case, there is a vehicle for that, and that's called our grievance policy. Most people have it. It's in that binder, so that you don't have to remember this. You can go look it up and see how to do it. But typically, you start with your worker first of all, and if you're really having trouble, we ask that you contact the worker's supervisor, and then that supervisor will try and work it out. And if not, you can move up to the higher office people like our CEO, and you can submit things in writing. And there's a procedure for that. So that's in there. Let's see. This is payments and allowances. So as I'm sure you're aware of, as a relative provider, you're either getting paid or you're not getting paid at this moment. It is a challenging process for all involved, but there is monthly stipends that come with for care and keeping of the child. There'll be a slide in a few minutes about the amounts of that. It's paid twice a month. You get a check from the agency, and there are some things that have to be put in place before those payments can start. And so a realistic time frame that we're looking at for relatives is from the date the child is placed in your home, and that's called the placement date. And that's one you want to remember because we use it for, as a starting date for everything. From the date the child's placed in your home, it takes about 6 weeks to get those payments started. Your licensing worker needs to complete a report called a 3130A, which some of you might have already experienced. And you need to sign up for Sigma, which is challenging as well. In the binder, there is an information sheet on how to sign up for Sigma, and we will walk you through it if you need it. So once those two things are done, then we start working with the Department of Health and Human Services to get things authorized, and that takes time as well. So please feel comfortable contacting licensing or your foster care worker if you're not getting paid. If you have financial needs, we can find resources. We can keep you updated on that process so that it's not as frustrating as it can be. You do have the right to use this money at your discretion for the care and keeping of the child. So you can use it to buy the child clothing, to sign up for activities. You can use it for rent because you're providing a house, or, a roof over their heads, groceries, gas, anything that, allows you to care for the child. Any questions on that portion? Or anyone want to add anything?
No, I'm just waiting to be paid.
We do know.
He's a big boy and it's hard to take care of him, So, yes.
And I will underline that 6 weeks. We can't do it any faster because between the report getting written and DHS putting approval on it, it just takes that long. So hang in there. What I should say at this point is that it goes from that date of placement and the state will back pay. So that is a comfort in many cases.
Yeah.
And I urge our parents to be proactive. It is okay to call your worker once a week, either foster care or licensing, and say, hey, what's going on? And that keeps the ball rolling as well. So don't be afraid to do that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a responsibility for the biological parent with the child being in foster care? Like, are they supposed to, like, maybe bring him things or provide him with food? Or
they're encouraged during visits to provide, they don't always have to bring like presents, but provide like something to do during the visit. If it's at a mealtime, they are expected usually to bring a meal for the child so that they have something to eat during that time, or if it's not during a mealtime, maybe snacks.
Okay.
That's something that the foster care worker might need to reiterate with the parent if they aren't bringing anything for them to do, because that is their responsibility. And with younger children, like babies, they're encouraged to bring like diapers, wipes, and maybe extra clothes if they need to, and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if they're supposed to provide him with clothing and stuff like that.
The clothing, you should be issued a clothing allowance, and sometimes that does take a while in the beginning. Just working with DHS, sometimes things are a little slow, but there is a clothing stipend that's given, and there's also clothing worked into the daily total given to kids.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean the parents like can't do that. They are encouraged to get them different things that they need as well to show that they are working towards reunification and able to provide for the child.
I just was wondering because they don't do that.
Yeah, and that's go ahead, Jacqueline.
That's something that the foster care worker might want to touch on with them again as well.
Okay.
You can see some totals here, and I'm just going to generalize and kind of circle this one. So for one child in the home, depending on their age up here, so ages 0 to 12, it runs about $241 twice a month. So roughly $500 a month per child is what you're looking at. They broke this out into room and board and allowance and clothing, but it doesn't have to be spent that way. You can use that money as needed for care and keeping. All right, let's see. All right, so this is the licensing process. And again, we encourage everyone to get licensed. It can seem like a frustrating process because, as Tawana mentioned earlier, it's very invasive. I'd encourage you to remember that it's invasive for a reason. We want safe homes for our children. We want to make sure that we're not putting a financial burden on the family that we're placing the child with. And that I might just have a few relatives that are giggling at that point because we do place that child first. If there are financial issues, we want to work with you. We don't want that to be a reason not to maintain placement. So one of licensing's functions is to help gather resources. If you have a child who in your home who is under the age of 3, we'll encourage you to sign up for WIC programs for formula and food and milk. We will provide you with foster care closet resources. I know we keep talking about that, but that's a resource you want to get to know. We'll have all kinds of things for free for our foster parents. Hygiene products, school supplies. Some have toys, books. Just if you can think of it, they've really got a lot of stuff and resources, and they really want to get them out to our foster parents. So there's that. All right, so here's the licensing process. Let's see. So the first step is you attend orientation, which you're doing tonight, which is fantastic. The second step is to fill out an application, and that's in your binder, and it'll be in the very first pocket when you open that up. This gets the ball rolling for us. And so if you're going to choose to become licensed, that's what we're going to be asking about. Along with that, there are fingerprint forms in the same pocket. And those fingerprint forms need to be dated the same day as the application because they're starting that background check from the moment you submit your application. That's the way I like to look at it. And that will stop us a minute that we're going to run every background check known to man. I know that we've placed the child in your home. We've already run an iChat. We've already run a central registry check. Well, now we ask you to get fingerprinted, and that's at no cost to you. And that'll do a thorough background check. We'll check the Michigan Public Sex Offender List. We check your Secretary of State record. If you can think of the background check, we are going to run it. And if we find something, again, we want to keep our families together. We prefer if you tell us about these things ahead of time so that we can work with you on what we should do about it. We want to keep our families together. So that's the first invasion I think that you'll feel are those background checks. Then in the next step of the process, we want to for that PRIDE training because we want to get you as much information as we can, as quickly as we can, so that you feel equipped to manage the child in your home. And while all this is going on, we are going to create a home study. And that's a large document. It's largely autobiographical, you could say. It turns out to usually be 20 to 25 pages long. And it includes the things that are on this list here, the home assessment, the clearances, a social history, references. We do ask you to find 3 non-related references. And we have a form that we send them, and they can fill out a checkbox for that. We want you to get a substitute caregiver, someone who can back you up, a babysitter if you have an emergency. You want this person to be aware of the child being a foster child and the importance of reporting. If that child gets hurt in a babysitter's care, they either need to tell you right away or they need to be able to call the agency if you're out of town. So that's a really important function. So make sure the person that you choose is someone who can truly help you out. If you don't have anybody in mind, if you're new to the area, if you don't have a lot of connections, we do ask other foster parents to act as substitute caregivers, and we can provide that. We can put out a request and say, hey, we've got a family who's new to Michigan. They really need a substitute caregiver. Is anybody willing to fill that function for them? And then we connect you that way. And then I'm going to say very loosely with a smile on my face that there's other requested documentation. We'll go on here. Oh, Tawana touched on special evaluations, and do you want to talk about those at all, Tawana?
Not yet. Would you like?
I can do it if you want. I just it was on your mind, so I was thinking.
I can pick back up.
Yeah, I'll elaborate.
So special evaluations happen when there's an allegation that a rule has been broken. So we have a whole list of rules inside of the handbook that we'll provide to you. And most cases it's if there's a CPS call reported. But in other cases, if the child tells a worker something that's concerning, or you tell us something that is a broken rule, once you are licensed, you are stating that you are going to follow the rules that were given. So sometimes things happen and we have to complete a special evaluation. Now, this is it's kind of scary when it's brought up to you at first, because you're being accused of something, but it's not really something to stress yourself out over. I've had people tell me before, it's not if one happens, it's when one happens, just because you're human and you're living your life, and sometimes we forget things, and sometimes it wasn't done with the intent to harm the child. But you are signing up to follow these rules, so once you're licensed, you need to follow those standards. And so we'll do a special evaluation that'll consist of interviews with the people in the home, yourself, the child, any other household members. A home visit will also be completed. We have 45 days to write a report, and sometimes we will find that there wasn't a rule broken, and once we complete that report, and then you don't have to do anything further. If we do determine that a rule was broken, then you would complete a corrective action plan. And then once that's completed, it's just in your file. It doesn't mean that you're in trouble or anything. It doesn't mean that the children are going to be removed from you. It's just a routine report that sometimes has to be completed.
Can I elaborate?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is a great time for me to elaborate. So some of the examples being used is you red flag yourself if you are not answering the phone and not allowing the foster care worker to enter your home, and you're not contacting us back, or we call you and you don't answer, but you email us back or you text us back. And we need to stay in contact with you because the child is placed in a home. That red flags your home, because then we're thinking, this is not a natural behavior. What is going on? So I mentioned before having relatives spend a night. So one example is a biological mother. She had her son in the home and he was spending some nights there, and the child was in the home. An incident happened, but she wouldn't answer the phone for us. And when the special evaluation went out, she wouldn't speak to us. She thought we were her enemies. And so when all the issues came up, there was nothing we can do for her. So in the future, if there's a problem, if there's something, please answer your phone. Don't not answer your phone, and please don't have relatives, the biological parents, staying in the home at all if they're not supposed to be there. And another thing Jacqueline said that I kind of wanted to elaborate on was we are not your enemy. So my supervisor, if I have a problem, I will go to my supervisor and I'm going to tell her everything. She's going to then know how to help me. But if I don't tell her everything, she's not going to know how to help me. And so you are with Guiding Harbor. If something does happen, like Jacqueline said, we are all human, things happen. We need you to be open and honest with us. If you're in the store having a bad day, I'm asking you not to do this, but just say you just tap the hand. You're not supposed to do that. There is going to be a special evaluation. And some things may take place. I have not yet done one yet, but Jacqueline has, but some things may take place, but we are not your enemies, is what I'm trying to get you to see. I need you to talk to us. Tell us what's going on so we're not left in the dark. And then if we need to, what do you call it? Not investigate, but not have your back. What's the word I'm looking for, Jacqueline and Kristen? Not have your back, but to
Support.
support. Yes, that's it, Jacqueline. Okay. If we need to support you, we know how to support you because you have told us everything. You're open and you have been honest with us. And I think the first thing that happens is our clients, they shut down and they will not answer the phone. They don't want to talk to us because they're afraid of what's going to happen. And so if anything happens, just please don't do that. I told my children, if you do something in school, even if it is your fault, I need you to tell me. If you got in a fight, just tell me the truth because now I'm to talk to the principal. But if I find out something that you should have told me at home, it's going to be a whole nother thing, you know? So we just need you to kind of just be open and honest with us. And that's it. Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent. These can be scary for foster parents, but it can also be a bit of a safety for you. Remember that anyone can make an allegation with Child Protective Services. It can be a bio parent, it can be a teacher, you know, someone on the street who, you know, if the child's having a meltdown in Kroger and they decide to call Child Protective Services. And we find as workers that we have to investigate absolutely everything. And so we want to support you through that. We want to help. It becomes a safety for you if we find that you did nothing wrong. And then if somebody makes repeated accusations, we can just point to that and say, no, this home has been investigated. They're just fine. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. All right, let's see. Oh, this is the part of our slideshow where it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of things at the end that we need to get in. Safe sleep is for children who are under age 3, and you will hear this term a lot in almost all trainings. If it does not apply to you, that's okay. People will still ask you about safe sleep, so kind of take notes on what it is. So this is a protection to the child. These are rules and regulations to ensure that they're sleeping in a safe space. So one of the things that licensing does is we want you to have a crib for the child. Now you might have a playpen, a bassinet, a pack and play. That's the word I was reaching for. But that's not enough. Each child in the home has to have a bed. And in the crib's case, it has to be a crib without a drop-down side, so all 4 sides of it need to be stable. It can be convertible from a crib to a toddler bed, but it just can't have that drop-down side. You can't put anything in that crib. No bumpers around the outside, no soft objects, no stuffed animals, blankets, and this is all in the name of we've learned over the years that these things can cause a child to suffocate, and we don't want to do that. So when you're putting a sheet in that crib, you want to put, a tight fitting bottom sheet, no top sheet, no blankets. You're going to want to have that infant in a sleeper that keeps them warm, no pillows, anything like that. Let's see, what's the list? There are dimensions listed here for cribs, but typically those run for cribs that are very, very old. The standard has been for some time that they meet these dimensions. But if you are getting a crib from our garage sale, and we do provide cribs through the foster care closet, and we find that this is an old one, we'll want to check those things. Now, the more important thing here is if that child falls asleep in any other area other than the crib or the approved sleeping space, you want to pick them up and move them back to their crib pretty much as quickly as you can. And I know it's easier said than done. Kids have been tangled up and separated from their parents, and their sleep patterns are messed up. So it's something you have to help the child get used to. If they fall asleep with you on the couch, within a reasonable amount of time, you want to get up and place them on their back in the crib. We don't want to do it on their tummy. Of course, when they can roll and do their own thing, you can't really control, but start them out on their back there. Children cannot be in the same bed with you. I hope that if they fall asleep with you on the couch, you're sitting up, because there is that smothering danger if you're laying down with a child. So a recliner, I know babies like to be close and need to be held. So just keep that in mind. This will also be covered in pride training, so you'll learn more. But now you can say you've had a little bit of safe sleep training. Okay, so this slide is about the books that you're going to find inside the binder. I think I've got a picture of them coming up, but let me flip ahead and see if I can. Oh, no, it's not in here. Sorry about that. Okay, so we call these the colored books. You're going to get a green one, a pink one, and a yellow one. All right. The green book is the most important, and it's called the Licensing Rules for Foster Family Homes and Foster Family Group Homes. It's written in English. It's not a long book, but it's very specific about the rules that a foster family needs to follow. And we'll go through some of those so you get an idea what we're talking about. The pink book is the rules that the agency has to follow, and we're required to give you all three of these. So if you need to dig in them, you have them. And then the yellow book is the actual Act 116, which is the actual law that allows us to remove children from care. And it's the one that we all go back to when we need to get much more depth on those rules that we're talking about. You'll also get something called child protection law. So you can read the law if you want to. That's the one with the legalese in it. And then there's a good moral character book. If you've got something in your background, either criminal or traffic related or anything like that, you'll want to open up that book, because there are some things in that book that will hinder you from becoming a foster parent. I mean, there's some big things. Most things we can work with, so we do want to know. So I'm going to say off the top of my head, if you've been convicted of homicide, it's going to be really tough to be a foster parent. And so go dig in that book and take a look at those. Let's see. Oh, so here's kind of an overview of the green book, which is our most important book that we're going to be looking at. There's a rule in there that says each person in the home must have a bed, and I already touched on that. That includes your biological children. So you can't put, your own child on the couch and the foster child in a bed. Everybody's got to have a bed. And when we say that, we want to help you get a bed if you need one. We access the foster care closet. We can ask for donations from people who work with Guiding Harbor. And we want to make sure that everybody's got a bed in that home, including yourself. So you also can't say, oh, I'm going to sleep on the couch and the kids will all have the bedrooms. So that won't work either. That's one of the reasons the state wants you to become licensed as a foster parent, is so that they can maintain a standard of care for all the kids. There are things like smoke detectors in there. We check for those. We want to make sure there's a working smoke detector on every level. If there's a fire and a child is hurt in that fire, we want to make sure that home is as safe as it can be. If you smoke, that's not a problem. We just ask that you do it on the front porch, outside the home somewhere, and never smoking in the home. Also, when you're transporting the children in the vehicles, you can't smoke there. If you have guns in your home or any kind of weapons, this would include bow and arrows, Bowie knives, BB guns, anything that is hazardous to a child. There are very specific rules on how to store those things, and along with medication. So I'm going to cover those things together. So with guns, if you have a gun safe, we love that, because then they're locked up, and that's wonderful. If you don't, we've got to have them trigger locked, and they have to be in a locked area. And this is probably the biggest change that most foster parents have to make, is how they store their medication. And we're not just talking your prescriptions. You want to gather up your Tylenol, your Excedrin, vitamins, things like that. It's preferable that you have a locked box, particularly if your children are over the age of, about 7 or 8, where they can get into these things. So a locked box is a good thing. We can also help provide that to you if we need to do that, or you can just go purchase something. Sometimes those portable fire boxes are about $20. Those make good storage boxes You can also use like a tackle box, for fishing, and just put a padlock on it. So it can be something of your own design along the way. We want everybody to have a carbon monoxide detector, and probably you were given one as part of the 3130A process when we were doing a relative assessment at that point. If it stopped working, please tell us. We'll get you another one, or you can go out and get one as well. And then we talked way back, I think early in the presentation, about that medical and dental appointments are required. Once a child is placed in your home, and his relatives, this is probably already too late, but they want them to go to the doctor within 30 days so that they can get checked out. Many of our kids haven't had vaccinations or have, teeth problems because they haven't had dental care. So that's really important. Any questions there?
No, I'm just still waiting on the authorization for me to be able to change his insurance and take him to the doctor.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Most kids, we try and get that insurance going as fast as possible. There are delays. It sounds like you're experiencing some delays. And that's something, again, licensing can work with the foster care worker on and just, see if there's anything we can assist with and what the status of it is so that we can get that. Some kids transfer from home to home. And if it's been a few homes, sometimes that insurance gets tied up there, or if mom and dad are using that insurance and there's some issues with, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong, but we'd be glad to explain any of that as needed. But stay on that with your licensing worker and your foster care worker, because that's so important.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I've already talked about a good criminal history record. I'm not going to go into it again. If there is a felony conviction, that'll need to be detailed. And what we do is we interview you about it. We talk about it. We request police reports and court reports. And that's in the name of showing that if it was a serious felony, that you have been rehabilitated and that you've changed as a person. If it's something minor, it's a lot. We have to detail it, but it is not a significant process. Okay, we've talked about that other documentation. And so here's the list. Inside that binder is also a checklist, and we can go through it with you once you get the binder. We ask for birth certificates for all household members. The child placed in your home might not have one, and the foster care worker can order one from the state if that needs to happen. Your marriage license or your divorce paperwork. We do ask that you go to the doctor and get a physical. That can be through urgent care or your regular doctor. We want to make sure you're in good physical health. Your licensing worker doesn't have any control over whether the child was placed with you or not, but if you as a relative, and I'm speaking generally, have a significant health problem, if you have, someone with cancer, things that might create challenges, we can work with some of that, or we can talk about, is this the best thing to be moving forward with? That's the purpose of that, to make sure that that person is able to care for the child. If you have a pet in your home, a dog, cat, birds, if you have birds, tell your licensing worker. Occasionally I get surprised by a bird. Especially the ones that fly around the house loose. I like a little heads up when that happens, because, oh boy. Anyway, dog or cat, for the most part, if your town that you live in requires a license, you need to get that dog licensed or the cat licensed. For the record, most cats don't need to be licensed unless you happen to live in Ypsilanti or Westland. Those two areas, and they're in Washtenaw County, require licenses for cats. I don't know why. You need a rabies vaccination, both to get the license for the pet and for our records as well. And of course, the thinking behind that is if the pet bites the child, we want to make sure they're safe and vaccinated so we don't move into rabies. I think one of the hardest things for many people is the financial documentation. In that binder, you're going to find a budget sheet that looks complicated, but I recommend that you just sit there one night and write down what you believe your bills are. You could get highly detailed, look up each bill and go right down to the dollar amount, and that's always appreciated. But you can also sit there and go, okay, I know my car payment is $265. I know, boy, wouldn't that be a great car payment? But your cell phone is $130, and you can round up a little bit. And then we need a copy of each monthly bill. That's to prove that everything's up to date. And if there's any problems in that area, again, don't be feeling like we're after you to judge you. We want to work out the issue as needed. So please talk to us about any questions you have there. I think we're coming to the end here. We are. Okay, so this binder, this slide says it'll either be sent to you in the mail or we'll bring it out to you. We also have many of these documents that can be provided by email. So if you want to fill out an application right away, contact your licensing worker. We will send it to you email. Right now with COVID, we will take any method of documentation that works best for you. You can scan a document and email it to us. You can fax it. You can mail it. You can take a picture of it with your cell phone and text it to us.
Another good resource is your foster care worker, because they're going to be out there anyway, and we do see them occasionally, or they at least are in our office. So if you have paperwork you want to give them, they can always put it in our mailboxes, and we can send them with binders for you as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. So don't let the technology get in your way. If you're just not comfortable faxing or scanning or whatever, we'll just make sure that the foster care worker is regularly asking for documentation. And then a reminder, the last thing is that to get started in this, you complete the application and the fingerprint forms, and then you send us those in any way that you want. And that gets us going. Now, if you choose not to become licensed, licensing is still here. You may not hear from us as often. We will be required to complete a relative assessment every year. So if the child's still in your home next year, you can expect hopefully the same worker to call you up and say, hey, it's been about a year. We need to go through and run the background checks again.
Question.
Sure.
Will the packet let us know where to go get the fingerprints done, or how does that work?
Yes, it tells you how to look it up online. There's fingerprint places all over the place, and we just find one that's closest to you, and you take those forms in and you get fingerprinted. And it doesn't cost anything.
Yes, ma'am.
Good question. I think, yep, that's the end of our slideshow. Any further questions for us?
I had a question for, I think the number was back in number 18. My phone was muted, so I didn't get a chance to ask my question. What if you have a parent that's intimidating and threatens to have the child removed from your home? How does that work?
So like, as much as the parents want to, they don't necessarily have a say in where the child is placed. And they might be upset and say whatever they want to say, really. But it's ultimately up to the agency whether the child is moved or not. And if we don't see any danger or any reason why the child should not be placed with you, then we aren't going to just up and remove the child from you. But that is definitely something to speak with the foster care worker about. A family team meeting might be necessary at that point, but you can't always please the birth parents. A lot of the times they're not going to be happy unless the child is placed with them, and it's at that time it's not something that's going to happen. So sometimes we just have to work with it. And like Kristen mentioned before, anybody can call Child Protective Services and make an allegation, but if it's investigated and nothing happened, or they don't determine any threat, we know that moving the child causes trauma, and we're not going to move the child unless we have a valid reason. We don't believe it's safe or whatever else. But ultimately, it's not up to the parent whether or not the child is moved.
because it don't even have nothing to do with me or him. It's just they get into it and they bring us into it. Like,
yeah, and that's common. We see, you'll pick up in training classes, they talk a lot about the birth parents and about some of the things that they are going through as well. It's a tremendous loss of control, and it's very embarrassing to lose your kids. And so we see a lot of anger from them. And that usually eases, especially if, our foster parent or relative is calm, and we can reassure them that they're in a good home, you're going to get your visits, and the agency ensures that they're in a good home for you.
okay. Okay, because I do my best to take care of him. I just don't want him pulled around like a yo-yo when they have their issues.
Yeah, and that creates instability for him too, and hard
Yes.
for him to trust as well. And so,
Yes.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
not something either that's uncommon. Like, if every time the parents had an issue with where their child was placed, like, we would never have a home for some kids, because a lot of the times they have something to say about everything, and it's not necessarily about even who they're placed with. It's just they're like Kristen said, it's a loss of control, and they want to be able to control the situation, and that's just not something we can necessarily accommodate all the time. We have to do what's in the best interest of the child, and typically it's not in the child's best interest to move them.
I understand. I understand.
so with
I was worried about that.
Yep, and you have our support too. If you have questions from us, or like the foster care worker, the foster care supervisor, there's always somebody there that can support you, because I know that can be really frustrating trying to do the whole push and pull thing with birth parents who are upset. So,
Thank you.
yep.
That brings up one last point that I'd like to at least get in here, is that there are times when a child needs to be moved. If it's because of a special evaluation or an investigation, that will be a safety factor. That means the child is no longer safe in that home. But on the other side of that, as a foster parent and a kinship provider, circumstances may change in your home. You might not be able to manage the child anymore. There are a lot of reasons where you might not be able to care for that child. And there is a procedure for that. And I like everybody to know it up front so that you can understand that we want what's best for the child ultimately. So what happens is you would put in a 30-day notice, and that gives us 30 days to move that child. And what you're telling us is that you can no longer provide care for the child. And at that point, once we get that notice, and hopefully we know about it beforehand, we want to work with you. We want to see if there's any areas we can provide support, help out, get services for the child. Do we need medication? There's a lot of different things we can do at that point. But on the flip side of that, it takes us 30 days to move a child. It's not us saying, oh, well, you're going to keep him 30 days or no matter what. It really does take that long. There's a shortage of homes. We want the opportunity to look for other relatives so that we can maintain families. Those people have to go through background checks. Their homes have to be visited, much like you went through in the first process. So it takes that full 30 days. If we can't find anyone, we have to run a statewide search as well. And our best tool for that is to keep you updated so that you know where we're at in that process of hunting for a home. But ultimately, our goal is the child's best interest. And we want to help you care for the child because you are on the front lines of this. And we're very grateful that you're willing to support the child and work with them. So don't forget that. We appreciate you quite a bit. Let us know if you have questions about that 30 days. And if you've got behavior problems, if you've got whatever they are, we want to know before it becomes a bigger problem. Okay?
Yes.
All right. If there's are there any further questions, I guess?
No, not for me.
Well, thank you all all for attending and spending time doing this. If you are watching a recording of this, let your licensing worker know that you have completed it, and we will provide you with the question and answer sheet that goes with it. All right. All right, we are finished. Then I will say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a blessed evening, everyone.
You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.